Hey, how's it going? So today I'm going to talk about another way of breaking the types down. And, I'm all about different ways of conceptualizing the Enneagram. Um, there's a million ways. That's kind of what's cool about it is that, different authors over time have come up with different ways to split it, break it apart, and find patterns and conceptualize, what we're experiencing and what we're seeing. So, I heard the Enneagram teacher and author Eli Jackson Bear, who is also a Type 8, break the Enneagram down into two halves. I don't know where he got it from. Excuse me. I don't know where he got it from, but it seems valid. It makes sense to me. And the left side is the non-conformist side, and the right side is the conformist side. And 9 is right in the center and represents the tension between those two sides. So if you're looking at, if you break it down, the head triad is completely nonconformist. Conformist is the heart triad, they're all conformist, and then the gut triad is divided and split, okay? Okay, and so, this is a way to quickly sort somebody because it seems to show up in people's attitudes and their behaviors. So, if you're a conformist, then you fit into systems more easily, tend to be more mainstream. This isn't about values, about better or worse. It's just about how you comport yourself in the world, how you go about your business and kind of how you show up in other people's lives. I think that, you know, you can quickly get a sense for if somebody is more rebellious, if they like to go against the grain more, if they want to do their own thing, and they don't want to go with the crowd to the point where it becomes a problem for them. They kind of can't seem to conform. Okay, that's a nonconformist. That's the left side. The conformists are basically the opposite. They tend to want to conform. They have a harder time just breaking out and doing their own thing. So they do a little bit too much conformism and trying to fit into the mainstream so that it causes them problems. It's part of the fixation. So, I'll break down why that is, and I'll go through all the triads. I'll start with the heart triad. Actually, I'll start with 9, which is actually no. I'll start with 1. I'll start with 1 because that's the first conformist point, and it's the first number on the Enneagram. So, the 1 is kind of the standard classic good person. They need to fit into society in a way because, they have to fit perfection. And perfection includes, a great deal of harmony and order, and there's just a bias there for, trying to be in accordance with other people. Ones often appear as good, upright, proper, and usually pretty conventional people. I mean, they can be very aggressive within that and they want to change things and they want to reform, but generally speaking, they present as very conformist. And you can look at it and how they handle the gut impulses. The gut triad is sort of defined by how they handle the raw impulses and desires of the body. And when you're 1, you really take those and they become filtered. They become filtered through a model of how to make the world a better place, how to, achieve high standards in themselves and other people. So they fit in, they, conform themselves just in that initial behavior alone, by, feeling those impulses and then saying, well, I'm not going to just let those out, because those are the raw primal, instincts, and those don't fit perfection. That's anger, that's lust, that's aggression, that's chaos, and they always take that and say, well, is that perfect? That's not going to get me the approval that I want. that doesn't fit a model of what's good. So that's one. Okay, number two is next. Two is very similar in kind of the goodness vibe. They tend to have less of it than the one. They don't have a little Mr. and Mrs. Perfect appearance as much, and they don't show up as much that way, but they want to make people happy. They're essentially people pleasers, and this is because when they take the core heart triad issue, which is, who am I? Do other people love me? What's my role? What's my purpose? Who am I in relation to other people? That's all heart triad stuff. And the three represents the core of that, which is essentially, I'm going to have to come up with a story to get people to love me. I'm going to have to come up with something, an identity, an image. It's all image based, right? So it's something that people look at and go, oh, I love you because you look pretty, or because you're doing good things, or just the way you are, your overall identity. Okay. So all of the heart types are conformists, because look around at our world. We operate according to images. We look at people and size them up quickly to make value judgments. And, all of society is kind of a hierarchy of people that, the marketing orientation is kind of the core of three. And image types, they're conforming to that, even the four conforms to that. So they think of themselves in terms of it, even though they're different, unique within that. They're biased towards it. They're subservient to it. So the two really looks to serve others. They're the pretty obvious, a pretty obvious conformist type within the image triad, and they take that question of, how do I get people to love me, and what story do I have about myself? They take that and they try to make other people happy. They basically look at what other people want, say, well, here, I got this, I've got $50 here, can you use it? And they try to offer something so that they can get love in return. So that's kind of how the two operates, and it really shows up in many places. They tend to follow the rules a bit more, than someone on the nonconformist side. They often want to make as many people happy as they can, so they will do that. They will conform. This gives them a bigger bang for their buck. As an image type, they figure you catch more flies with honey than whatever the saying is, right? If you're nicer with honey than vinegar, it's, if you're nice to people and if you conform, then you're more likely to get love back. So they're just biased towards conformism. It's pretty clear cut. All right, and then next is the three. Three is a similar kind of thing. I explained how the marketing orientation is the core of the three, and it's a mainstream collective market. It's something objective that appeals to the masses. It's, again, based on images, which everybody can perceive. We all can look at things, we can all size people up quickly and try to fit them into a model of what a person is, and the three represents that struggle, the most in the most focused way. So with threes, you get people that appear like the classic success story. They want to kind of be the embodiment of success and value in other people's eyes. Unlike the two, they are not trying to serve people as much. The marketing orientation is a little bit more, I don't know, they don't try to trick people as much about them wanting something in return. I think that with the three, it's more obvious that they're salespeople, that they're trying to sell you something, and that's why they tend to embrace vanity a little bit more and to embrace the image. And they can become vain, and they can embrace that because they accept that it's about them getting something. They're not, the two comes along and says, well, I don't need anything. I'm just here to help you. And they believe that's going to give them the best shot at love. But, with the three, they're not saying that. They're just saying, hey, here's a beautiful image. I'm, a great person. I'm successful. I can do it all. I can do whatever. and okay, sure, I'm blowing smoke up, I'm tooting my own horn, but so what? I mean, that's because I really am what I appear to be, and that's what you want, So there's a transparency there about the three, but they are conforming to a conventional ideal of success, of value, of performance and image. They like to use objective metrics. They like to use, again, status and hierarchy and, concrete forms of, commodification and objectification that are not as focused on serving other people. It's more focused on that exchange of, here, I'm selling something. It's similar to the two, but, the two, I perceive that the two really they come at it from an independent angle of, I really don't need anything. So there's a kind of lie there that they do need something and they cover up what they're asking for. Whereas the three kind of engages with you in more of a back and forth. Also, the three is more adaptable. They don't need to be serving other people. If it feels good and it's getting them what they want, there's not as much of an interpersonal exchange there. That's why they can do better, up on a stage. They can kind of have more detachment from their audience. They like people to admire them, and they don't have as much interpersonal connection, but they have to conform to being on a stage and what's expected of them. Okay, so that one is also pretty obvious. Now, the four is next, and I talked a little bit about how the four is kind of a pseudo non-conformist within the conformist side. They're still looking at images and the persona that they're trying to embody and what's going to get them value. But they focus on how they're different and they play up their differences. So they're people that stand out as different and unique within the mainstream. They always are still thinking in terms of that. They're still thinking in terms of what's going to get me value and love. What's the story I've come up with about myself? It is often one of tragic, experiences and sadness and envy and melancholy and all the things we identify four with. But it's still very much about playing along with the game. It's, if you talk to fours, often they can be pretty conventional people in a lot of ways. In my experience, they don't break that many rules because, again, as image types, they conform anyway. They want to look beautiful. They want to be kind of the same things the three and the two do, but they've focused more on what's missing and what's off about themselves and how their situation is worse and their own flaws. But they're still kind of playing that same game. They're still going out into the world and going, what's going to get me love from those people, and focusing on the story there and the identity, and they play up their identity and whatever, even though they focus on how they're different, it's still drawing attention to their value as a person and their identity, being in that triad. So, okay, next we get to 5. And, 5 is, if you go around, 5 is now on the other side, right? So this is the first type on the nonconformist side. And with 5s, you can really see it. They don't care that much what other people think. They're kind of in their own world. They're pulled back and they're detached. They have always identified themselves as separate from other people, and it's not in the fourish way of value identity triad stuff. It's to do with figuring out what's going on. It's about it's their orientation towards the world. This is the head triad now, and it's all about, how am I going to figure out what to do? How am I going to understand things? How am I going to become more competent? How do I navigate the world? What are my plans? What am I going to do? To kind of intellectualize how they're actually going to take action. So the five, they pull back. They're a pretty obvious nonconformist type in that regard, and the fives are known for being extremely experimental and strange and eccentric because when they were trying to figure out what's going on, they pulled back so much that they're now not a part of other people. I mean, they separate themselves a great deal, and I think that's pretty obvious. They become rebellious and they realize how different they are from other people, that they're not a part of other people anymore, that their inner world operates differently from what's external to them, and they try to create a model of the outer world, but the two often don't add up, and so they become extremely nonconformist. Okay, so that's a pretty obvious one. Six, the thing with six is that they have phobic and counterphobic tendencies, and you can really see the nonconformist side in their counterphobic tendencies. But with the head triad, all of these people are trying to figure out what's going on, and there's this experience that they're not a part of it all. The head triad developed out of this sense of the world as a fearful thing outside of me. Everybody else is different from me. I have to try to conquer it. I'm not really harmonizing with it necessarily. I feel fear towards it. I feel that it's something I have to overcome, especially the six. They're adventurers, as chosen from the adventurers. They really see a great deal of danger in the world, and sometimes it's hard to see them as a nonconformist because they have very phobic people within six. But all of the phobic people have a tendency to act out. It's like they're just waiting to go against what you say. I mean, even the most phobic six, maybe Woody Allen is like a phobic type six. He's very kind of can't ever calm down. I mean, they're nice and they can be self-effacing and get along with people and stuff, but they don't ever really settle because that would mean conformism. That would mean conformity and being able to let go of that, detachment from the world. That's how they've understood themselves. That they are different from everything out there, and they need to somehow overcome it and learn about it. And that essential feeling of difference from the world and being in the mind, right? They identify with thoughts, which are much different from connection in the world. With where you have value. The heart triad, they're fluid. They come together with people. They're more relationship focused people, and that's why they embrace conformity more. But the head triad, they're more intellectual, and they operate with logic and plans and logistics and how is this going to work. And the six, maybe the fearful phobic sixes tend to be more go along to get along, kind of people, but still they're in their heads. The head is a schizoid thing that's detached from the environment. So they're processing and they're analyzing, and they fundamentally have a way of just not conforming on a basic level because they don't have that fluidity. They don't have what you look for in that heart triad fluid space where they look around and say, "Oh, I'm like you. We fit into this persona. We're the same, and I'm a blank. I'm a performer, or I'm a star, or I'm a helper." I mean, they don't. That's not how they live their lives. In the same, that's not what drives them as much. Okay, and so you get nonconformity there, even in the most phobic, servile six, because they're still trying to figure it out. They're not just one of the people. I mean, they're every day they're still trying to figure out what's going on within that, and there's tension there. Okay, so seven is a more obvious one. I mean, this is a classically rebellious type, and it's because they see the good. They see good in the world, and the world is it's a little bit like with the eight, but the seven wants to feel good things. They want to grasp after you know, things that feel good and taste good and give them a good experience. They want happiness. They want the most out of life. But the world doesn't necessarily offer that readily. It's so they have to come up with ways of doing it. And again, they have to split themselves from the world in some ways, because then in order to get what they want from it, they really kind of have to be rebellious, and they go against the grain, and because you have to take things. I mean, a gluttonous person really goes overboard. They take more than they deserve. They take more than other people want to offer, and more than they themselves can handle. And so with the seven, it's an excessive fixation. They really, all of the fixations are, but this one is in a way that's selfish, and it's self-serving. Again, if you go to the conformist side, the two, 3, and 4, we're looking at pride, something very helpful and conforming. We're looking at envy, which looks at other people and says, I want what you have, which is conforming to what they have. And then, of course, you have 3, vanity and deceit. It's a similar thing of, hey, I want attention from you guys, so I'm going to conform to something, that you can give me. Whereas, with 5, 6, 7 now, we're looking at, anti-conformity, non-conformity. The 5 is avaricious. They pull into themselves and say, this is mine, and they grasp onto it, and I've got my space, my time, my energy, and it's all about me. It's not about, meeting you halfway in terms of what you want, okay? In the 6, we talked about the fear. 7 is, of course, gluttony. It's very much about grabbing things and going overboard in self-indulgence. And a pretty obvious one, we know that 7s can be a rebellious type, but they also tend to be nice because they want to focus on positivity. And to, again, like the 2, another positive outlook type, to get the most out of life, you really need, it helps to use honey instead of vinegar. So you're going to be charming and sweet with people and upbeat and happy, which can seem conformist, but really, if you look at what they're doing, they often just kind of do what they want, and that's part of their life philosophy. Okay, next is 8. 8's another obvious one. 8's probably maybe the most obvious one, because they have things like vengeance and rebellion as their core, fixations. If you look at the 8, they've always been identified moving against people. It goes back to the core, dynamics of the gut triad, which is all about this physical sensate reality, that this is all there is, really. This is sort of it to the 8. They can be into all kinds of things. They can be hedonists, can get into intellectual stuff, and but the gut triad feel the body, the physical reality, more heavily than the other types. They feel that actions speak louder than words. They feel that stuff matters, materialism, not that they're materialistic, but just on a basic level. These are physical, bodily, sensual people. Okay, so when those impulses come into the body, when we interact with our environment, and you want to take action, you want to feel things in the sensual space, you want to make a big impression on people, you want to see results in the physical space, as a gut type, you're going to do something with that. And the 8 really, they feel those impulses strongly, and they exert their right to be free, to go after whatever it is they want, that full contact with life, to really feel things intensely and to be present and to really feel their presence. So they end up being non-conformist because we all kind of want to do what we want to do. Every individual has their own impulse and their own will, and the 8s embrace that. And, that's kind of the basic mechanic of the 8. So you can really see that they're going to be non-conformists in a big way, varying, of course, by subtype and the other elements, but they're going to be rebels, and their entire fixation is based on doing whatever they want, whatever they feel moved to do, and then reacting as well to things that stop them with vengeance, an awareness of injustice, because that isn't right for people to stop me, right? We all have a right to this physical life, it's kind of celebrating the body in that life, that lust for life, okay? So that's kind of an obvious one as well. Maybe the best example of a rebellious person, You can look as well at some of the counterphobic sixes because they go against fear so much that they can seem extremely, be also very nonconformist. And then, of course, the nine is split. The nine is split between the two halves. So they're a little bit like the eight. They are aware of this physical reality, and everything is flesh, and they're trapped in the body, and they feel their impulses, and they feel a sense of aliveness and groundedness and boundaries, and all of these are, the gut types are more sensitive to these things. But the nine, instead of going the way the one goes, where there's a filter, like the one has a very clear-cut filter, like filtration system for those impulses, which makes them more civilized. And they think of that stuff and go, well, that's not right. It's not right to be lustful, to be, some of that stuff's not okay, right? Like you wouldn't, whatever impulse you have, you wouldn't just punch somebody. That would be bad, right? There's a huge filter on the one. They control their behavior through this filter of what's going to be good and approach perfection, okay? The nine, they kind of don't know what to do. They're aware of it, but they sort of fall asleep to it. They're driven by laziness, which is okay. They know there's the right thing to do on the one side, right? I mean, I could go out and instead of being mean, I could just be really nice, or I could clean my house, or I could do something good for myself or another person. I mean, that's very, the reaction formation of the one, they could do that, but that takes effort, right? I mean, that takes, what's the point in doing that? I'm upset or whatever. Do I really have the energy then to go the opposite direction? They just don't have the oomph of the one to get them over there. I mean, they're caught up in this tension. They're very aware of all the different Enneagram points and how it pulls, and they're the most ambivalent, really, of the types, occupied by their position. And so they feel that pull over to one, but they also want to do the eight thing and say, well, I just want to do it. I just want to go out and destroy things. I just want to go out and get revenge. Okay, so they feel that. They feel both sides, but then they feel, but that wouldn't be right. I mean, I could also do nice things. So they tend to be ambivalent and have, a conscience similar to one, but it's more lazy and they fall asleep, and that's why they can just kind of drift. They don't have the same aggression of the eight because they fall asleep to that. They kind of numb it out. They go, well, am I really going to get what I want? They do kind of a cost benefit analysis, like, is that going to be good for me one way or the other? Is that even going to help people? On the one side, like, they can see, the ins and outs of both, and they kind of represent the ultimate ambivalent split between the two halves. They don't conform completely. They're called the anti-non-conformist or the conformist, but they have struggles over that. Because look, if I conform to people constantly, then I'm in inertia and I get stuck within that. It's kind of like I become very stubborn, right? It's like, oh, I'll just go along and do whatever you want. And then I'm conforming to what you want, but then I don't break out of that. It's like there's no dynamism there. So in their laziness, they become stubborn and they can become inert. So they're kind of a contradiction. They are conformist, but they're non-conformist too, because they'll say, oh, I'm going to go along with that, and then they'll keep doing it for 10 years or whatever. I mean, then they become very hard to move out of that pattern. So they operate more on inertia, which is, laziness. And hey, we set this in motion, so now we might as well do it, right? Because you might as well. It's easier of them to grasp at low-hanging fruit, to keep doing whatever they're doing. They're changing direction. They don't change directions easily. So they're kind of both. They're nonconformists and conformists. They're an interesting type. All right, so that took up a full half hour just to explain those, and it could go into more depth, but that's one way of explaining the types, is to split them into the two halves of the Enneagram. The left is the nonconformist side, and the right is the conformist side, and the nine is right there on the midpoint. So, all right, thanks so much for watching. I like to share these lesser known facets of the Enneagram to help people understand how the whole system works. All right, take care.